Charred Tongue is the debut full-length album from Necronos, a San Juan del Rio, Mexico-based death metal quartet. And I would say, in some sense, I thought this was going to be more of a death doom metal band. With their initial single, Noble Rot, back in 2023, kind of, it sounded a bit like Into Coffin or Sempiternal Dusk. There was a little bit of a blackened death doom feeling to it. And I think that as they've added more people to the project, it's evolved into something that is about as intense as something like Crypts, but it still has some of that those incantation-esque roots in there, and to the point where this is a little bit more brutal than expected and not as doomed, but it's still very good. It's a kind of a modern take on death doom metal that still has the full old school gear intact. And what we'll do is we'll cut to a song here to get a more clear sense of some of those extremes and how they catch. But really, the full album is going to convey this in a much more clear way than in brief. So in terms of true underground death metal, there is a certain level of darkness and not just in the themes or the imagery, but in the actual craft of the sound and the intent of the riffs. And I hate to have to explain that, but there's more than just cavernous atmosphere at work here in terms of both the blasted and brutal sections of this record and the more slower, more deliberate tension of it otherwise. So the way that this interacts is bestial. It's dark and it's cryptic in the way that I'd expect from underground atmospheric and brutal death metal in some sense. It's brutal in the sense that a Funebrarum record might have been in the early 2000s, where there's just a certain heft to the way they attack these songs. And for me, that was the most exciting part of it. But waiting for the heavy and amorphous level of doom and death doom happening in the riffs, it took a little bit more time. There's almost a disembowelment-esque feeling to the way that it develops, and that was most of my interest to start out. But I found I warmed up to this record pretty quickly just for how dark and estranged it is. It's very much a burnt, cavernous feeling record that never quite squares up into one lane. It shows all that it can do in a very short amount of time. There's a succinctness to this record that reads as confidence. It's direct in the way that it conveys all of its ideas, and it gets right to it. And so I appreciated it as just a heavy-hitting death metal record with a broad oeuvre that has a great sound and some pretty interesting art direction overall. So for me, this is one of the more interesting records of January in general. It's a high recommendation. Go ahead and read my review for more of my thoughts and check out the album now. It released on January 13th.